Once upon a time there was a group of practitioners, to be precise, in the group of Zhen Yang, where they expelled a boy because his dantian was broken, making it impossible for him to practice martial arts. He was therefore expelled from the sect for life. The boy they expelled is our protagonist, who still refuses to leave the group because his injury was caused by his service to the same group. The elder, who is the wise man of the sect, tells him that he is a piece of human trash who still dares to look for excuses to stay there. The protagonist is disappointed because he has done so much for the group and yet they treat him like this. We find ourselves exactly 3 days ago with our protagonist, who is making an incursion into a forest to protect some kind of elixir. However, he senses someone following him, and he is not wrong. This boy appears and tells him to hand over the elixir, and maybe he could forgive his miserable life. The boy's name is Lu Shi from the King Yum group. The protagonist stares at him with his sword and tells him that he will never give him the elixir, not even in his dreams. The protagonist attacks him, but the guy disappears, wondering where he went. However, the guy reappears behind the protagonist, but the protagonist notices and manages to dodge the attack. But not for long, as he receives a small wound on his neck. The protagonist knows that the guy's speed is too high and that it will be fatal if he doesn't react quickly enough to anticipate one of his movements. The guy uses a strange technique where he uses his palms and connects them all against the protagonist, injuring him badly. The protagonist picks up his sword and plunges it into the ground, reversing the technique. The palm technique is too dangerous because it does not damage the surface of the body, but the inside. The protagonist lunges at the guy, but he manages to anticipate his movement and dodges the attack with an incredible move. The guy counterattacks and manages to disarm the protagonist by throwing his sword far away from him. The guy tells the protagonist that he is pathetic and should kill himself with a technique that envelops the protagonist, a seal of plaster applied with a technique called spring finger, which breaks his dantian. However, the protagonist knows that the guy only played with him for a while and still managed to break his dantian. This is the story of how the protagonist lost his dantian. He realizes what people in the 6th dimension are really like, and from that day on he is no longer a member of the Zhen Yang sect and leaves it. As he descends the temple stairs, the people around him whisper about how Louis Nutri can be such rubbish, and how useless he was in the sect. The protagonist continues on his way, but runs into a man called Zhao Kang. This guy has only come to taunt the protagonist, telling him that he is a useless dog and that he will not leave his beloved brother. He tells him that if he still thinks he's what he used to be, he'll beat the protagonist up a bit. Everyone around him had this boy, so they didn't do anything to stop his humiliation. This boy continued to make fun of the protagonist until a beautiful girl appeared, who made the boy who had been making fun of the protagonist calm down. However, when he goes to greet her, she ignores him and goes straight to the protagonist to say goodbye with a cold look. He tells him that he doesn't need his pity and leaves the temple to go into the forest. As night falls, our protagonist gazes at the stars, feeling peaceful and remembering the happy days of his childhood, when he and his brother were united. The old master, who had earlier thrown him out, was very affectionate towards them all, and the beautiful girl was smiling beside them. The protagonist, remembering these beautiful scenes, says that he wants to go back home. However, his thoughts are interrupted by a strange light coming from the sky. It's a meteorite. The protagonist is surprised and knows that a fallen meteorite has a great chance of being a treasure, so he rushes to get it. The protagonist went to see the strange meteorite and approached it cautiously, noticing a strange and strong aura around it. He got closer and closer until he was right in front of it, and a strange flame began to surround his body. The protagonist wondered what this fire was, and suddenly various heavenly bodies began to enter his body. He realized that this strange flame could heal his meridians, and the flame became a part of him, causing a strange pain. In the blink of an eye, the protagonist found himself in a place called Danhai, where several colored orbs were lined up. One of them stood out from the others. It was Danhai, which was a higher level than Tianji and could only be reached by someone who had already reached the Void Realm. In this case, our protagonist. The strange flame began to affect Lupillo, our protagonist's spiritual quota, which he couldn't control due to its immense power. He fainted, only to wake up in a house where a young boy was waiting for him. The protagonist introduced himself and asked why he was there, only to find out that he was in the enemy city of his former sect. He realized that his power was truly great and not a dream, as he could feel it running through his being. The protagonist said that with this legendary fire, he could avenge his clan. The protagonist is called to eat and goes to where the boy and an old man are waiting for him with some food to help him recover. The protagonist is surprised to see a spiritual beast, but he starts to eat and they chat for a while. The protagonist is very grateful to both of them for their help, as he really needs it. The old man tells the protagonist that he is a cultivator, but the protagonist is not, nor does he belong to any particular clan, which makes him a free cultivator. The old man says it's a shame, because being a free cultivator doesn't have the same advantages as being an official one, as the clan provides tools to improve the process. The protagonist knows that being a free cultivator is not feasible, but he has no other choice. The protagonist knows that the old man is absolutely right, but he offers him another help. He tells him that if he wants to become a disciple of the MANHWA sect, he'll write him a letter of recommendation, and he needn't worry. The protagonist is very grateful and they continue to eat. However, they are interrupted by a boy who enters the house and kicks the door, looking for something that belongs to him. The old man tells him that he doesn't have it, which provokes the boy's anger, and he throws the table with the food on it. The eagle that tries to attack him dies in the attempt, and the boy beats the old man until the protagonist puts a hand on his shoulder. The protagonist hits the boy, leaving him on the ground, and just when that's not enough, he grabs him and hits him again before throwing him out of the old man's house. The old man is impressed that the protagonist was able to defeat the boy, who is on the second level of his clan, in just one move. Even though he is not a professional, his strength is incredibly overwhelming. As night falls, the old man thanks the protagonist for dealing with the boy. Even though he was his teacher, he didn't train him well. The protagonist tells him not to blame himself, but the old man says that he was one of the high-ranking members of the sect, but made a mistake, which is why he is in this small spiritual garden. He tells him that the reason for the boy's visit is that he wants a spell that the old man possesses. The protagonist is surprised. A heavenly spell is not something anyone can have. This sect has a spell that is well known among the 3 sects, called the Celestial Spirit Spell. Once attached to a person's body, their Kai is sealed for a short time, a valuable spell that not everyone can have. However, this old man has one sealed in him. The next day, the old man finishes writing the protagonist's letter of recommendation for the cult. He tells him that he has a lot of talent and that he should not waste it on bad things. He also gives him a beginner's manual and tells him to read it. Before going to the sect, the protagonist trains a little, where he realizes the incredible power he possesses, using an ability that devastates the ground with the same force as thunder. The protagonist arrives at the cult, where the first thing he sees is a large mountain peak. There, he meets the leaders of the clan to give them the old man's letter of recommendation. The gods knew who the old man was. They see the letter of introduction and ask him his age. When they hear that he is 16, most of them march off, rejecting the protagonist. Only one of them stays and tells him that if he wants to start as an external disciple, the protagonist accepts. Perhaps he can move up in time. They tell him that as an external disciple, he doesn't have permission to have any of the cult's treasures, only a bottle of elixir. However, he does have permission to go to the armory and train. They also warn him that he only has permission to be on the first floor, and that he should not go to the second floor. The protagonist is in the armory looking for weapons, but none of them interest him because they don't match him. Some were lighter, some heavier, some longer, and some didn't work. Until the protagonist's aura leads him to a path, and when he realizes it, he follows it and finally finds a sword called Tiank, which means Skybreaker. The protagonist picks up his sword and realizes that it's too heavy, about 200 pounds, but he chooses it anyway. When he leaves the armory, the old man who looks after the weapons tells him not to be so stupid and asks why he chose such a heavy weapon with his weak body. The protagonist tells him he doesn't care and asks him about the sword's origin. The old man tells him that the sword was already there when he arrived, and that it was around 100 years old, but that no one had chosen it because of its weight, as it didn't even have an edge to cut someone with. However, the old man allows the protagonist to take the sword, which he appreciates very much. When he leaves, the other members of the sect start whispering about how stupid the protagonist must be to choose such a heavy sword as his main weapon. Although they can sense his strength, his cultivation level is still very low. Suddenly, they see other sects arrive, including the protagonist's former sect. The protagonist realizes who they are and is surprised to see them so soon. He retreats, saying that one day he will take his revenge. On the other hand, the beautiful girl from the beginning feels a familiar aura, but ignores it. The protagonist is with his great sword, giving it his abilities and blessings. He realizes the incredible power it possesses, having found a hidden treasure that excites him too much. This power is now part of his sword. The protagonist takes the elixir bottle to increase his cultivation power, but one bottle is not enough, so he has to complete sect missions to get more elixir. Looking at the available missions, he chooses the one about hunting the bloody wolves. Everyone is impressed with his choice, but he is interrupted by others who want to do the same mission. They ask him if he has a problem. One of the boys grabs the protagonist, but he defends himself and pushes him away. The protagonist tells them that if they want his emissions, he has no problem. They can choose another one. Later, another boy tells him that he hit his sister and that he won't get away with it. The protagonist knows that the boy is of a lower rank than him, so he can win. But the boy also knows that the protagonist has tremendous power, which excites him because he likes people who pretend to be weak and powerless so that they go unnoticed. They both prepare to fight, but an old man who is the leader of the sect interrupts them and tells them that if they want to resolve their conflict, they should do it in the fighting center, which is the sect's arena. The boys leave, but not before telling the protagonist that it's not over yet. The protagonist, choosing another mission, chooses one called Fire Wolf. Later, while carrying out the mission, he comes across a sacred herb and tries to take it, but is attacked by the Fire Wolf. The protagonist anticipates its movements and defeats it, extracting its core. As the protagonist throws away the core he has extracted from the beast, he is almost hit by a surprise attack, but manages to dodge it. Suddenly, an old man with a stick appears and asks for the beast's core. The protagonist tells him that he is only level 1 and has no treasure, so he is wasting his time. Nevertheless, the old man attacks him, but the protagonist manages to dodge and counterattack with a powerful ability that hits the old man hard. The old man is surprised to learn that it was he who had the power of flames, and that the protagonist's power had neutralized his poison by refining it. In the end, the protagonist defeats the old man and steals all his possessions, which were too many and very valuable, as he had several bottles of poison and too many magic stones. While the protagonist was robbing the old man, he managed to see some kind of book among his possessions that taught him some techniques. The protagonist was very excited because he didn't have very valuable things, and he'll undoubtedly use them for himself. The protagonist spends the whole night reading the book and learning the techniques, and in the end he gets the tiger strength kick and the ability to lift. The protagonist was too tired and decided to leave. On the way, he sees a girl in the air, which he deduces to be some kind of class that allows him to ascend. The protagonist stops to admire the girl's beauty until he realizes that she is being chased by 3 thugs. The girl looks injured, and the protagonist says that this is not his business, so he is looking for the best way out. However, the girl ends up landing right next to him, and he has no choice but to help her. The girl hides behind a bush while the protagonist goes to talk to the guys who are chasing her. He tells them that he is just a guy passing by and that the girl they are looking for is gone. The 3 guys tell the protagonist not to lie to them, or he will suffer a terrible death. Nevertheless, the protagonist gives them a false location and the guys leave, not without mentioning that the girl is heavily poisoned and won't last long. When the guys leave, the girl comes out of her hiding place, walks from side to side, and then passes out in the protagonist's arms. The protagonist takes the girl to a mountain, where he lights a fire to extract the poison with his power. The girl, on the other hand, was falling apart, but felt very hot, not because of body heat. Without thinking, she throws herself at the protagonist, kisses him, and then does things that were not part of the mission. Meanwhile, in the garden of the old man who had helped the protagonist, a disaster occurs when they come looking for him and demand that the old man hand him over. The old man refuses to give them the magic power they seek. The boy is tied to a tree and tries to defend his grandfather, but is unable to do anything as the old man is beaten while the boy watches helplessly. Back to our protagonist, the effects of the poison wear off on the girl, and she wakes up at the worst possible moment, misunderstanding things and trapping the protagonist, tying him up. Others arrive, including a high-ranking one who tells the girl that those who conspire against him deserve to die. Their fight is interrupted by powerful auras approaching to protect the girl. The girl's sister has arrived to help her, and the boys flee as they are of lower rank. They had managed to find the girl by following her trail, but one of her sisters has other matters to attend to and tells her injured sister to rest. The girl went to see if the protagonist was still there, but he had already jumped off the mountain, tied up. The girl is very embarrassed by what has happened and imagines everything that has happened. The girl's sister arrives and asks her what's wrong and if she did anything on the mountain. The girl completely denies it, and they are told that they have to leave because they are expected, evading all questions. On the other hand, our protagonist is not yet dead, having saved himself from the fall. However, he decides to leave. Meanwhile, in the old man's house, the 2 of them are being tortured by the boy who wants the old man's abilities. They tie him up and whip him. One of them warns the boy not to kill them as it would be a sin and he could be paid more later. The boy is not interested in the lives of these 2. But he turns and sees the magic beast, which is an eagle. They plan to cook and eat it, the old man and the boy. Suddenly, our protagonist enters the house and is surprised to see this scene. The boy has been torturing the people who helped him when he was in trouble, so he attacks, and the boy has a skill that the protagonist gets. This skill did not harm him, and he manages to hit him, leaving him on the ground again. He sends his subordinates to attack the protagonist. The protagonist manages to defeat both of them, throwing them off and giving them a good beating. The boys beg for mercy, but the protagonist can't forgive them so easily. He takes the boy and tells him he'll punish him 100 times more for his pain. He uses a technique called poison needles. Although the needles are not actually poisonous, it feels like millions of bees are constantly stinging him. The boy begs for mercy, and the protagonist tells him that the same boy he fought when he was watching the missions sent him for the heavenly power. The protagonist is furious and will make him pay for what he has done, even if it costs his life. At the temple, the boys are training when a messenger arrives and challenges the protagonist's nemesis. However, the protagonist is confident because his rank is much higher than the challenger's. The master asks the boy who is challenging him, and he says that it is an internal student called Chen. The master is surprised, for Chen was a low-ranked disciple who was rejected by everyone when he first arrived. How dare he challenge his disciple, who is a great warrior, incredibly fast and virtually untouchable in battle. The master tells him to teach him a small lesson, or everyone will talk about how he takes advantage of the weak. The hour of the fight arrives and everyone is gathered to watch the fight, or as others say, the end of our protagonist. They both arrive, and the boy tells the protagonist that he's looking for his death, and if he wants to die, he should tell him quickly, even betting a lot of money. However, the protagonist wants to take it to another level and tells him that he wants to pay with his own life. Everyone trusted the young disciple, as they knew absolutely nothing about the protagonist, except that he was a madman who had challenged one of the most powerful people in the sect. When he hears about the protagonist's bet, the boy is not surprised, as he was confident of winning. He tells him that he knows who he's up against. The protagonist only says that he's afraid because he doesn't want to fight him. The boy laughs and tells him that he thinks it's a good deal because he has all the chances of winning. He then says not to blame him if he dies and that he really despises him. The fight begins and various rays and auras begin to emanate from both of them. Everyone around is impressed with the way the fight went, as it was very even. Previous fights of this type usually end in seconds, but not this time. The protagonist was fighting hard. He was not going down easily and was defending the honor of the elder and the child with tooth and nail. The protagonist attacks him with his sword, but the boy manages to dodge it with a great move, leaving the protagonist completely disarmed. The boy takes advantage of the protagonist's weakness and attacks him. The protagonist is now defenseless and has no choice but to die. However, just as the boy is about to hit him, the protagonist rises into the air. The boy is astonished and immediately receives a strong kick in the face from the protagonist. The boy touches his face. He has indeed been hit. The protagonist did not stop and continued to attack the boy. The boy kept dodging, still unable to believe that the protagonist had actually hit him. The spectators were also amazed because the boy had never been touched in a fight like this before and he didn't even move to fight. How could this happen? The other guy also had a powerful secret skill, surprising everyone around because this skill is only taught to a small percentage of students, and even then, very few can master it. The boy used this ability and a ray of light with an incredible aura appeared in his palm. He attacks and throws it at the protagonist, who easily deflects it. The boy and everyone around him were stunned that he could repel such an exclusive ability of the cult. They all began to believe that the protagonist was made of stone. After repelling the ability, the protagonist appears from the sky, ready to kill the boy. He strikes down with his enormous strength, and everything shakes with the impact of the thunder sword. The boy blocks the attack, but the blade breaks. Everyone around could not believe that one of the clan's most powerful disciples could be defeated by someone of such low rank, who had just joined the sect and was not even fully accepted. The protagonist put his sword to the boy's neck as a sign that he had lost and must die. Everyone was stunned, realizing that if he killed him, he would have a huge problem with the sect, as it is a crime to kill a disciple. However, the protagonist is true to his word and will do anything to make the boy suffer until he dies. Suddenly, he is interrupted by a beautiful girl who is the same girl from the protagonist's old clan. She tells him that everyone is a bunch of hypocrites and starts talking to him. He interrupts her and asks her if she had relatives and if he had tied her to a tree and tortured her day and night, would she forgive him? He tells her that even if he could, he wouldn't show him even a simple gesture of pity. The protagonist uses his ability and raises his arm, determined to kill the boy. Everyone around him waited for the blood to be spilled and the disaster to begin. Suddenly, as the protagonist is about to strike, he is stopped by a hand. It was the master who had arrived on the scene. He tells him not to kill his student, because the protagonist will be his new student. Everyone around is surprised by what this master has done, as it is impossible for him to ask someone to be his disciple. Most of the time, it was the others who asked him to train them. Now the protagonist coldly tells him that he is not interested in being his disciple. Both the master and those around him know that what the protagonist has just said is a shock. It was the first time the master had asked someone to be his disciple, and the first time he had been refused. To make matters worse, he was rejected by a disciple of an external rank. The protagonist tells him that he has achieved what he came for that day with the letter of recommendation, because now they want to train him. He says that he is not a puppet that they can move at will. The master warns him and shows him that he can kill him at any moment, trying to make him not afraid to die, and that if he dies, he will take his title with him to the grave. The protagonist tells him that he is tarnishing his image and kills him in front of so many people. The master tells the protagonist that killing a disciple is a serious offense against the sect, and he is unwilling for the protagonist to kill his disciple. You keep talking to the master, who keeps telling you that it would tarnish his image to kill you in front of so many people. The master knows it's true and takes a hefty booty, which they throw at his chest, knocking our protagonist to the ground. As the master takes his pupil away, he tells the protagonist that he will pay for this. The protagonist tells him to wait and that it would be better if it happened soon. The people around the sect talk about how the boy was defeated and about the rejection the master suffered from the protagonist. They also talk about the boy's near-death experience and how powerful the protagonist is. The news reaches the leaders, who are impressed by the boy's defeat. The master scolds the boy for humiliating them both and making him look foolish. However, the protagonist discovers that he has been paid a fortune of around 500 magic stones and has also been given many bottles of elixir, which could help him improve his rank. Observing the knight, the protagonist realizes that he's in trouble for provoking a master of that rank and refusing his offer. Only a madman would refuse such an offer, and that madman was the protagonist. He then goes to the house of the elders, where they have a huge banquet to share their rewards with everyone. They also discover that the eagle they thought was dead is alive, but badly injured. The elder is delighted to have someone like the protagonist protecting him, as he was treated miserably after committing a crime and was sent to this small garden, where even young talented warriors caused him trouble. The protagonist's arrival makes him very happy. While everyone is eating and sharing, the protagonist is talking to a child when they are interrupted by the presence of a girl who turns out to be the sister who appeared in the test and tried to prevent the protagonist from killing the boy. The protagonist is surprised to see her and asks why she's there. She gets straight to the point, telling him that the master wants to recruit him to one of the sect's great peaks, where prestigious masters and high-ranking warriors train elite warriors. If you've made it to this part of the video, let me tell you that you've been one of the few people to get here. So, comment the word loyalty in the comments. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss any videos. That being said, see you in the next video.